Okay, so um, you sent over a ton of notes on this whole handling confrontations and conflicts thing, and wow, it looks like you've been doing some serious research.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I've been really digging into it, trying to kind of crack the code on how to deal with these situations, because let's face it, they can be tricky.
Totally. And reading through everything you sent over, two things really jumped out at me. First was this idea that avoiding confrontation can actually make your anxiety worse in the long run.
It's true. It's like it fuels this cycle of worry and stress that just keeps building.
Exactly. And the second thing was how important it is to really understand the other person's feelings, not just like the surface level words of the argument.
Yeah, it's about going deeper and getting to the root of what's really going on. Why are they feeling this way? What need isn't being met?
That makes a lot of sense.
Hmm.
So for this deep dive, let's try to pull out like the most useful stuff from your notes.
Sounds good.
We'll uncover why avoiding confrontation is such a common thing, but also why it's not always the best way to go.
Right. It's about finding that balance.
Exactly. And ultimately, we want you listening out there to walk away feeling more confident handling these situations, whether it's at work, at home, or anywhere else.
That's the goal. And I think a good place to start is by acknowledging the elephant in the room, avoidance.
Okay, yeah, why do we avoid confrontation so much?
Well, it often feels easier in the moment.
Right?
Oh, absolutely.
Like dodging a bullet.
Exactly.
Yeah,
But what does your research say about the long-term consequences?
that's a great question. And you know what's funny? My notes actually compare it to the simmering pot. You keep turning the heat down to avoid a boil over, but eventually that pressure just builds and builds until
Explodes.
exactly it explodes. My research really goes into the negative impacts of avoidance, both personally and professionally.
That's such a powerful analogy because it highlights how avoidance doesn't actually solve the problem. It just delays the inevitable.
Right, and in the meantime, it can create a lot of internal turmoil.
For sure. So what kind of specific examples did you come across in your research?
Well, there's this one scenario that really stuck with me. It was about a meeting where someone's constantly being interrupted and talked over. They feel angry and disrespected, but they stay silent.
Oof, I can feel that just hearing you describe it.
Right. And later on, that resentment just festers and grows.
It's classic avoidance.
Mm,
And unfortunately, a really common experience. Your notes actually point out that this type of avoidance can become a chronic pattern, leading to low self-esteem, decreased confidence, and even strained relationships.
wow. I never really connected avoidance to those bigger issues before.
It's like letting those small cuts get infected because you don't want to deal with them.
Exactly. So we've established that avoidance isn't the answer. But why is confrontation so important?
Well, your notes highlight how productive confrontation is actually key for both personal and professional growth.
You know, I've never really thought about it that way. I always saw confrontation as this negative, destructive thing. But if it's done well, can it actually lead to positive change?
Absolutely. Think about it. When you confront an issue head on, you're creating an opportunity to address it, find solutions, and set healthy boundaries.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, my notes also talk about like how to handle manipulative people and emotional outbursts, those situations where mastering confrontation feels even more crucial.
Right. Not everyone approaches conflict constructively.
Yeah.
So knowing how to handle those types of situations is super important for protecting yourself and moving forward.
Mm.
But your notes also go into the benefits of healthy confrontation, not just the defensive side. What resonated with you there?
Hmm. Well, there's a part that talks about how speaking up, even when it's uncomfortable, can lead to more respect and potentially even a better outcome in the long run.
Interesting.
It made me think about all those times I've bitten my tongue and later regretted it.
We've all been there.
Yeah, so it seems like mastering confrontation can actually empower you to advocate for yourself and create positive change.
I think that's a great takeaway. So we've talked about avoidance, but how do we actually go from avoiding confrontation to embracing it in a healthy way? Well, your notes break down different approaches to conflict. Maybe we should start there.
Yeah, let's talk about conflict styles. My research outlines 5 main approaches: avoidance, which we already touched on, accommodation, compromise, authoritarian, and competition.
That's a good breakdown.
Mm.
It's fascinating how each style has its own pros and cons,
For sure.
and knowing when to use which one can make a huge difference.
Totally. Like avoidance might seem appealing for the small stuff, but it can really backfire in the long run. And then there's accommodation, putting everyone else's needs first to keep the peace.
Hmm.
But my research talks about how that can lead to resentment down the line.
It's like being a doormat. People just walk all over you, and eventually you start to feel used and unappreciated. So then you have compromise.
Yeah.
When would that be a useful strategy?
Yeah. Well, my research suggests that compromise is great for like quick solutions or when you just can't agree 100% on something. It's about meeting in the middle, which can be useful in a time crunch.
Right. It highlights how context matters. There's no one right way to handle every conflict. It's about choosing the approach that best fits the situation. So what about the authoritarian and competitive styles?
Okay, so the authoritarian style, I think of it as like the my way or the highway
Oh,
approach.
I like that.
It's often used by people in positions of power, but it can leave others feeling unheard and resentful. Then there's competition. It's like a zero-sum game where one person wins and the other loses.
Right. Those styles can be effective in very specific situations, but they often create more conflict in the long run.
Yeah.
What about the style your research highlights as the ideal collaboration?
Yeah, collaboration. It's all about working together to find a solution that benefits everyone involved.
Exactly.
Sounds great in theory, but I imagine it's also the hardest to pull off.
You're absolutely right. It requires open communication, active listening, and a willingness to understand the other person's perspective. But the payoff is huge. You're more likely to find a solution that truly works and lasts.
Makes sense. My notes actually include an example of a manager who uses this collaborative approach during a confrontation. They use listening, mirroring, and validating techniques to create a safe space for open dialogue.
That's a perfect illustration. It shows how collaboration can play out in a real-world scenario. It's not just about stating your own needs, it's about really hearing the other person and acknowledging their feelings.
It's about shifting the focus from me versus you to us working together.
Okay, so we've covered the different conflict styles. We know avoidance isn't ideal, and collaboration seems to be the gold standard, but how do we actually put this into practice?
That's where the rubber meets the road. And luckily, your notes go deep into practical tips for handling confrontations. Want to unpack those?
Okay, practical tips. I'm
Okay.
ready. Let's dive in.
So one that really stood out to me was this whole idea of getting behind the feeling. It's about recognizing that emotions are usually like at the heart of conflicts, but you can't actually solve a feeling directly.
You're exactly right. It's like trying to fix a leaky faucet by, yelling at the water. It's not going to get you anywhere.
Haha, good point. So it's more about figuring out what need is driving that feeling.
Exactly.
It-
That's the real root of the issue.
So instead of just saying, oh, I'm so angry you never help out around the house, you need to dig a little deeper.
Yeah, ask yourself what's really going on behind that anger.
Maybe it's a need for support, a desire for fairness, or just feeling totally overwhelmed.
Exactly. And once you can identify that underlying need, then you can start to address it in a more constructive way.
It takes the focus off the emotion itself and puts it on finding a solution that meets everyone's needs.
Right. You're moving from a place of blame and accusation to a place of understanding and problem solving.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, another tip that really caught my eye was avoiding black and white thinking.
Ah, yes, the always and nevers.
Exactly. My notes are filled with examples of those absolute statements and how they can just kill a conversation.
It's like throwing gasoline on a fire. They instantly put people on the defensive.
So instead of saying, you're always late, maybe try something like, hey, I noticed you've been late to our last few meetings. Is there anything going on?
Much better. You're not labeling the person, you're just addressing a specific behavior.
Right. And by asking a question, you're inviting them to share their perspective.
You're extending an olive branch instead of pointing a finger.
Speaking of hands, my notes also talk about the power of those awkward pauses during confrontations.
Oh, the white space.
Yes, exactly. It's so tempting to just fill every silence, but those pauses can actually be really valuable.
They can prevent you from saying something you'll regret.
Totally. Which I definitely need because I'm someone who tends to speak before thinking sometimes.
Uh-huh. Well, you're not alone. It's a common tendency. But that's why those pauses are so important. They give you a chance to really process what the other person is saying. Choose your words carefully and respond thoughtfully.
It's like hitting the pause button on your emotions.
Exactly.
Give yourself a moment to collect your thoughts. Okay, now 2 more tips that really resonated with me.
Okay, I'm listening.
The first is about not personalizing things.
Oh, that's a big one.
Yeah, like don't take everything as a personal attack.
Your notes actually include an example of confronting a micromanaging boss.
Oh, yeah. That one's tough. But instead of just accusing the boss of being controlling my notes, suggest acknowledging that maybe your early performance contributed to their need to supervise you so closely.
Interesting. So it's about taking ownership of your part in the dynamic.
Right. Not necessarily taking the blame, but just recognizing your role.
And sometimes that self-awareness can be the key to unlocking a more positive relationship. Okay, and the last tip.
How to respond when you're the one being confronted.
Ah, yes. That could be tricky.
My notes have a whole section on this.
Well, it's easy to get defensive when someone's confronting us, but the key is to stay calm and composed.
Right. Don't let your emotions get the best of you.
Your notes actually provide some really helpful questions to ask yourself in those moments.
Like, what information do I need to gather? How can I best manage my emotions? Those are great prompts.
They can help you stay grounded and focused.
My notes also emphasize the importance of active listening when someone's confronting you.
Absolutely. It's about really trying to understand their perspective, even if you don't agree with it.
So asking clarifying questions like, what happened from your point of view, or what could I have done differently?
Right. You're showing them that you're taking their concerns seriously.
You're genuinely interested in understanding where they're coming from.
And speaking of perspectives, your notes have this really fascinating example of a manager handling an employee complaint.
Oh yeah, they use that three-step approach.
Listen, mirror, and validate and respond.
That's it. It's such a great framework.
So first, the manager listens attentively to the employee's complaint without interrupting.
And then they mirror back what they heard to make sure they understood correctly.
That mirroring piece is so important because it shows the employee that they were truly heard and that their feelings are valid.
And finally, the manager validates the employee's feelings and offers a thoughtful response.
They explain their decision-making process and outline a plan for the future.
It's about turning a potentially negative situation into an opportunity for growth and development.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It all comes back to that shift in perspective we were talking about earlier, moving away from avoidance and embracing confrontation as a chance for growth, understanding, and positive change.
I love that. But before we get too carried away, let's remember that not all confrontations are created equal.
Good point.
Your notes also talk about the importance of choosing your battles wisely.
You don't have to confront every little thing.
Right. Sometimes it's better to just let things go, especially if it's not a big deal or if the relationship isn't that important to you.
Exactly. It's about being strategic with your confrontations and picking the ones that will actually make a difference in your life.
So how do we know which battles to pick?
Well, your notes suggest asking yourself a few questions before diving headfirst into a confrontation.
Okay, what kind of questions? So my notes say to think about like the potential impact of the conflict and how important the relationship is to you.
Makes sense.
And also like your own emotional capacity at the moment. Sometimes it's just not worth the energy or the potential fallout.
Totally. It's about being strategic and focusing your energy on the confrontations that really matter. Your notes even suggest practicing those smaller confrontations first,
Oh, that's interesting.
almost like a confrontation gym. Start with lifting those lighter weights before going for the heavy stuff.
I love that. It's all about building those skills and getting more comfortable asserting yourself.
Exactly. And as you start to embrace confrontation in a healthy way, you'll find that it becomes less scary and more empowering.
It's about reclaiming your voice, setting healthy boundaries, and creating positive change.
Absolutely. And remember, you don't have to do this alone. Your notes also talk about seeking support.
Oh, right, like from a therapist, a friend, or a mentor.
Exactly. Having that outside perspective can be so valuable.
Yeah, it's like having a personal confrontation coach in your corner.
Uh-huh. I like that.
Mm.
So as you start to integrate these tips and techniques into your life, I think you'll find that your relationships improve, your confidence grows, and you just feel more equipped to handle those tricky situations.
Wow, we covered a lot of ground today. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling way more prepared to handle confrontations now.
Me too. It's amazing how much practical wisdom was packed into those notes.
Right. And the biggest takeaway for me is that confrontation doesn't have to be this big, scary thing. When approached thoughtfully and skillfully, it can actually be a really positive force in our lives.
I couldn't agree more. It's all about shifting our mindset from avoid at all costs to how can I use this to create a better outcome for everyone?
Exactly. So to wrap up our deep dive into handling confrontations and conflicts, I want to leave you with this one final thought. Remember those meeting interruptions we talked about? What's one assertive but polite phrase you can have ready to go the next time it happens? Something that clearly communicates your need to be heard? Maybe like, excuse me, I wasn't finished making my point, or I'd like to finish what I was saying.
Those are great examples.
Just something simple but firm. We'd love to hear what you come up with and how it goes in your next confrontation.